I'm delighted to welcome Fraser Stewart, MCC Head of Cricket and Laws Guru. There's been quite a lot of discussion around the laws of cricket over the past week, and luckily we've got the best possible person on to talk about it. Fraser, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. It's nice to be here.
Great. Before we get into the decisions over the past week, I wanted to try and work out what the process for adding or changing a law in the law of cricket is. So I was wondering, is it just you sort of who oversees the whole thing, or is there kind of a group of you? And I wondered if the World Cricket Committee were involved much, and just what the sort of the consultation process is from realising like this is something that needs to change to the final wording that goes in the law book, essentially.
Yeah, well, thankfully for everyone, it's not just down to me. We've got actually quite a robust process. Obviously, we're constantly watching the game and seeing how the game evolves. And at MCC, we have quite a wide committee structure. And sort of, I guess, going from the bottom up, we have the laws subcommittee, which sits twice a year and has representatives from the international game and sort of from the recreational games. You have to remember that although most of the cricket that's seen, by people is at the professional sharp end, the majority of cricket that's played, the vast majority of cricket that's played, is in a park on an afternoon with just 22 players and 2 umpires and no TV cameras. So we do have to make sure that the laws are for the whole game and not just suitable for the top level. So yeah, we have the laws subcommittee, which contains about 10 people. Sort of more well-known names would include Simon Torfel, Sundaram Ravi, Claire Polosak from Australia has just joined. So we've got a wide range of people spread around the world, and they meet 4 times a year, and we sort of review what's been going on in the game and look at all the laws and see whether they're fit for purpose and whether any need to sort of go on the to-do list for things to change. Then sitting above the laws subcommittee, we have the MCC Cricket Committee, which is a mainly sort of UK-based body, sort of that discusses all things related to MCC cricket. But then we also have the World Cricket Committee, which is perhaps the best known of all the MCC's committees, and that contains the sort of the great and good, if you like, of the world game. So current members include Kumar Sangakkara, Justin Langer and Graham Smith have both just come on. We've got Alistair Cook, Mike Gatting chairs it, Susie Bates is on it, Claire Connor's just come on it. So it's a real stellar collection of people from all around the world, and they meet normally twice a year and discuss all sorts of things relating to the game of cricket, but a lot of them are laws related. They enjoy the laws chats actually around and getting into the detail. And so quite often the policy will more be set by the World Cricket Committee and the Cricket Committee, and then that feeds back down to the laws subcommittee, where we have a sort of a drafting group within that subcommittee, who will then try and get the desired policy sort of onto paper in as clear and as coherent as way possible. So there's a lot of input goes into it. We make sure that we get international input, and then when we have a sort of a big change like we had in 2017, where we had a new code of laws, we will quite often go out to governing bodies with sort of questionnaires and kind of take the temperature of what people think about the game and any changes they think should be made. And then all the feedback we get from that, because that will normally cascade from an umpires manager in a country, that will go down to players and umpires at recreational and professional level. So we'll get a view of what people think about the game, what laws that they may be happy with, which ones they're less happy with, and then that will then feed into our decisions as to whether a change is necessary.
Okay, so within that process, so once you've got a wording of a law that you think you're happy with, is there like a stress testing thing? Like, because one thing that cricket doesn't do that other sports do, as far as I'm aware, is having sort of like trial periods for laws too much. Is it mostly that you just kind of work it out between you that you think that you try and go through every eventuality, or is there much?
Yeah, well, I mean, Some things are trialled by playing regulations, and we do have a close relationship with the ECB, partly sort of geographically, and some things that we put in the laws are sort of trialled as ECB playing regulations. Before then, when we used to run university cricket in the UK, we quite often used the cricket in their competitions just as a bit of a petri dish, if you like, to try out new things to see whether they worked or not. We consult with ICC very closely as well. Our sort of Jamie Cox, and before him John Stevenson has sat on the ICC cricket committee, and so we work very closely with ICC as well to sense check things with them, and often things will get will be trialled either internationally or otherwise in more local leagues to see whether they work. That happened a bit with when we introduced the player conduct law 42 in 2017, which allowed umpires the power to sort of sin bin or send off players. That was trialled in quite a few leagues around the UK before it was actually brought into the laws of cricket to see of the effects it had. So it's not always possible to do them all and to check them all, but we do sometimes try and make sure that they've had a bit of a run out before they go into the law book.
Yeah, okay. And I was wondering about the relationship with the ICC, because I wonder if more, I mean, well, you see it a lot when cricketers will say like the ICC need to do something about it, and they actually mean the MCC need to change this or that. Do you think that independence, that's a good thing? Do you think that you're so focused on this one thing rather than having a million things on your plate, and also you're just kind of, I don't know, there's less political influence on the MCC, I suppose? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think we have a fine balance. We are independent and neutral, which I think is a great asset for a body that holds the laws. But we also, through particularly the creation of the World Cricket Committee, and in more recent years, a more sort of international flavour to our laws subcommittee, we want to make sure that we are truly global. Yes, we're based at Lords in London, but we are a global club. We have members all around the world. We play cricket all around the world. And we want to make sure that the input we're getting is not just a very Anglo-centric way, but one that reflects the way that cricket is played in different countries, and that's indeed the case. The cricket on a village green here, might be played very differently from how it's played in perhaps Australia or in India or Pakistan or wherever, and we need to take all that into consideration and make sure that we take a global view on things and not just a sort of perhaps an English one. And yeah, we do work closely with ICC. A lot of what the laws we make will be incorporated into their playing regulations. And we do have a healthy dialogue and debate with them, right at the top level and sort of between the cricket departments as well and the committee level. So there's a good amount of crossover, but I do think that our sort of neutrality is an advantage as the holder of the laws.
And if you don't mind me saying, you yourself have a very powerful position within the game. I know there are lots of checks and balances, but in terms of what cricket actually looks like, that's determined by the laws essentially. I mean, I guess the question is sort of, so when you step down, whenever that is, what's the process for appointing the next MCC head of cricket? How can we be sure they'll be sort of as good as it as you are?
Oh, the recruitment procedure at MCC is very robust, and whenever a position becomes available, it's sort of advertised, and there's a proper process that goes through. My position has kind of evolved over the years that I've been at MCC. I started off running the cricket office, all MCCs, the cricket that MCCs plays. But I did a law degree and got a background in law, so I then sort of moved into a law's position and have gradually sort of moved up, and the laws have come with me. So, and I played a lot of amateur cricket, and so I sort of know the game from that level, and then more latterly have become involved in cricket at a higher level as well as an administrator. So yeah, I think I'm quite well covered to do the role, but yeah, as and when I move on, I'm sure there'll be someone equally or better skilled to be able to carry on the role.
Okay, well, let's get down into the nitty gritty of the two decisions this week. Let's start with the Neser catch, and I wanted to ask what kind of influences how the laws are worded, if that makes sense. Because, so just for those who haven't seen it, Neser took a catch inside the field of play, threw the ball up in the air, stepped outside the field of play, jumped and threw the ball again, and then he landed back outside the field of play before stepping back in to complete the catch. And in that instance, the laws are completely clear. There's no sort of fault with them. It says that your final contact with the ground before your first contact with the ball has to be within the field of play. And then from then on, as long as you're not in contact with the ball and the ground at the same time, you're fine. So people's objections, which there have been some, are essentially sort of aesthetic, right? It's about how they want the catch to look. In those cases, how much do you listen to public opinion, and how much is it, this is how we think it should be? How much is it, this is what the committees above us has said it should look like, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's all good points. And I think that the point to raise is, yes, there's been some concerns raised about the legality of the catch, and not the umpire's interpretation of anything. Everyone's clear that the umpire got it right as per the laws. There's just some people questioning whether the law itself is right, and that's fair for them to do. We think it is. This is a law that we've worked on quite a lot since 2010. Since then, since particularly the rise of T20, we've seen a rise in athleticism of fielding on the boundary, and we've tried to sort of evolve the laws to cater for that rather than to outlaw it. We think that these bits of fielding are good for the game. They're really exciting. You see some tremendous bits of athleticism from the players in both the male and female games. And it's something that we felt is good for the game. There's a lot of talk more generally about the balance of the game and perhaps favouring the batters a bit too much. The bats are getting more powerful, the attacking play, the boundaries are getting brought in and shorter. So we feel that the wording of the current law, whilst it may perhaps grate with some, is a fair law, because you can't be grounded outside and in contact with the ball at the same time. So the key thing is the first contact must be from within the boundary, or if you're airborne, that you took off from within the boundary. So we don't want people standing 10 yards behind the boundary and then having their first impact there and sort of bunny hopping it back in. So the game starts off within the boundary. We've seen all sorts of different catches like this. There was one that Matt Renshaw did a couple of years ago in the Big Bash. Well, Matt Renshaw started it, and a teammate finished it, because he took it inside, threw it up, went over, and then sort of jumped up like Neser did and parried it back. But instead of parrying it to himself, he parried it to a teammate who completed the catch. And there was less fuss about that than there was about Neser's one. But actually, from a laws perspective, they've done pretty much the same thing. They were sort of inside, and then they were outside, and they jumped up and patted it back. So I think we are happy with the law as it currently stands. We have these committees, as I mentioned earlier, that will review this and check that we think it's right. But it was very exciting for the game. It was a brilliant bit of quick thinking and rare skill. This doesn't happen very often. This law has been like this since 2013, and you can count on less than 5 fingers probably the number of times that it's really happened in exactly this way. And it's good for the game, and the fielder is rewarded for some a great bit of fielding.
Yeah, and for knowing the laws as well. Neser, he said after the game that he'd remembered the Renshaw catch, and so for that reason was why he attempted what he did. And it's good to see players being aware of the laws. I guess an example of a player maybe not being so aware is the attempted Adam Zampa run out from the other day. And there are a few things to talk about here. Again, if you haven't seen it, Adam Zampa went to run out Melbourne Renegades Tom Rogers at the non-striker's end before he bowled the ball. But although Rogers was out of his ground, he was given not out because Zampa's arm had passed the expected point of delivery before the wicket was put down. So first, let's talk about that clause, expected point of delivery. There was a statement on the MCC website yesterday that said this has long been defined by the MCC as the highest point in the bowler's action. So I guess my question is, why do the laws not say that?
Yeah, the laws have said as been drafted as they are pretty much since 2017. We have actually moved the law to the run out law from the unfair play law just recently last October. But yeah, we say the expected point of release rather than the highest point. That's the way it was drafted at the time. I think, if we, in a future iteration of the law, we might look to clarify that a bit closer. But I think most people are aware when the expected moment of release is. It's when the arm sort of gets up there and when the ball is going to come out. We don't use the word vertical because not all bowling actions come with a vertical arm, but at the highest point, we kind of, if you see a bowling action, you know when you think the ball is pretty much going to be released, and it's roughly when the ball is up at the top. So we say we use that point because what we want non-strikers to try and stay in their ground for as long as possible, but we don't want the one a bit like Zampa did, and he didn't seem to be aware of the law, which is fine. No fingers pointed at him, but what we don't want is the bowler going sort of through with the bowling action, and once you see the arm sort of up at the top and then coming back down, the non-striker has a reasonable belief that the ball will have been delivered by then and will probably sort of move out of his ground, and we don't want the bowler then coming back round and doing the sort of the run out on the way back. So that's not something we want. But this law is, it's always controversial, when it happens. But MCC has been quite firm and hasn't moved its stance for a while on this. The bowler is often castigated as the villain of the piece, but it's the non-striker who started all this emotion by potentially leaving their ground early. And MCC's message to non-strikers has been and will continue to be, this can all be avoided very simply if you just stay in your ground a little bit longer, watch the bowler's release point, make backing up a bit more of an active thing rather than a sort of passive, just meandering out when the bowler's roughly there. Just actually focus, watch the bowler's delivery action. When the ball's released or when the arm is at the top, that's when you're safe to leave the ground and you can head out. And I think if non-strikers did that, there would be far fewer incidents of these, and it would all go a bit quieter.
Yeah, and can I just ask a very specific thing about the Zampa run out, which relates to all of this? So as I read that first sentence, I'll just read it out of that law. So it says, if the non-striker is out of his or her ground at any time from the moment the ball comes into play until the instant when the bowler would normally have been expected to release the ball, the non-striker is liable to run out. So that suggests to me that the key thing is when the non-striker leaves their ground, not when the run out has to happen, if that makes sense. So if we're just to switch just some of the words around, for me, if a parent said to their child, if you come downstairs from now until I finish making dinner, you are liable to be punished, I don't think it's implied in there that the punishment will come before they finish making dinner, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's quite a convoluted example, if that's cleared anything up at all. But do you see what I'm saying?
I do, and we've actually been looking at that this week, and I can see how people can be confused by that. There is the first three words of the next sentence are in these circumstances, which and then goes on to explain it, which tries to sort of qualify it a bit. But the MCC's intention has always been clear that it's not about effectively the run out has to happen before the arm gets up there, rather than if the non-striker leaves before the arm gets up there, the run out can then take place even if it's later. So we are been looking at that this week in light of this, because I think some people are just not reading the law wrongly, but just perhaps just as you mentioned there, just getting not quite getting the emphasis as we would like it. So there's perhaps a bit of tidying up there, just to make it clear. In our eyes, that wouldn't be changing the law in any way. It would really perhaps just getting the wording a bit better so that it's a bit clearer for everyone. But the key thing is until the arm, the bowler has to try to affect the run out before the arm gets to the vertical. Once the arm's got to the vertical, it's too late for there to be a run out.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, and it seems clear. It was completely clear what the MC intended, and the umpires clearly understood that as well. So I guess my final question is, how does the relationship work between the MCC and the umpires in sort of cases like this or similar to this, where there is sort of an interpretation of the law. So, for example, with the expected release point, that umpires from at all levels of cricket kind of know that that's what that's intended to mean is sort of the highest point in the action and that sort of thing. How does that process work?
Umpire training is not handled by MCC. It's done by different countries around the world, but MCC does release materials and clarification. So MCC releases the Tom Smith's cricket umpire and scoring book, which is the sort of the go-to textbook on the laws of cricket, and goes into a lot of detail explaining things. So most umpires at the top level will have a copy of that book and can use that as a reference tool. Also on MCC's website, on the Lords website, there is a Laws e-learning portal that takes you through all 42 laws with lots of diagrams, videos, voiceovers, top tips from international umpires. And again, in there, that will help to explain, give extra flavour to the laws that aren't just there contained in the 42 in the laws of the 42 laws. I guess then also there's umpire training, which is so in England it's done by the ECB, in Australia by Cricket Australia, and etc. around the world. They quite often will use a lot of MCC's materials, but will also create their own. The ICC have what they call the almanac, which is effectively a bit like Tom Smith, but it basically goes into scenario planning for all sorts of what ifs, and also giving their umpires and match referees advice on what to do in specific situations. So we will sometimes be asked to feed to put some input into that. And so there's a lot of materials that are out there for umpires that some freely available, some at a cost. And hopefully that will help to explain to people the laws so they can understand them all better.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Fraser. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Not at all. It's very nice to see you.